Good evening. My name is Jeb Bush. I'm the Executive Director of the Forsyth Farmers Market, and welcome to our Farmsgiving. Farmsgiving is a great fundraiser for the Forsyth Farmers Market that involves food and friends while supporting a great cause. Tonight we're going to hear from acclaimed chef Martha Nesbitt. Many of you may already know her from her cookbooks and her newspaper articles, and learn how she incorporates local ingredients into everyday recipes. She's going to make something spectacular for us, so I hope you'll follow along. And also, I hope that you'll click the Support Us button and be able to financially support the Forsyth Farmers Market. Thanks so much and enjoy the show. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Tom Kohler.
And your connection to Forsyth Farmers Market?
I am a shopper and I serve on the board.
Okay, wonderful. Why do you support Forsyth Farmers Market?
I support the market for three reasons. One is that I have learned to appreciate the quality of the food, and it's quite frankly helped me lose a little bit of weight and be healthier. Two, I love coming downtown on Saturday mornings and seeing that particular mix of people that show up at the market. And three, I like the idea of supporting these very small, sometimes local farmers and producers that are just, business people trying to make a living. And I like the idea that we provide a platform for them to share their goods.
To you, what is Farmsgiving?
Well, Farmsgiving is, for us, it's a fundraiser, of course, but it's also a friend-raiser in that a Farmsgiving host, somebody like me, would think of a way that they'd like to use product from the market to offer a dinner or a lunch to their friends, and in return for that, of course, their friends would offer some financial support to the market. And so it's a fundraiser and a friend raiser for the market. And I happen to like to cook, and I happen to not be afraid to invite people to do things. So why not have a Farmsgiving dinner?
Hi. What's some of your favorite memories from Farmsgivings that you've either attended or hosted?
Well, let's see. I've attended one at Barbara and Charlie Cortez's house, and one of my favorite memories there was sitting across from Mr. and Mrs. Kreitz Sr., who I didn't know very well, but I knew them from being around and from the market, but being able to spend the whole evening across from them was, for me, very interesting. And then I did host one at McVisral Temple. We partnered with McVisral Temple and used their social hall, and we had some entertainment, and the gentleman who's the chef for the McVisral was kind enough to help out with some of the food. And we turned out a nice crowd. It was kind of a low dollar contribution, but a nice crowd, and just had a very fun evening. And so I think those would be the two that stick out in my mind.
Why should people host Farmsgiving parties?
Well, one, it's a party, and this is Savannah, and that's kind of what we do. So that's one. Two, it is a way to support the market, and I would say that if you shop the market or are a financial contributor to the market, in some way this can be a next step, which is to become a fundraiser for the market. And so it's an opportunity to sort of strengthen your commitment to the market and to help build our grassroots base of people who contribute to the market. And I think you'll find that if your friends are not connected to the market, they'll appreciate the opportunity to learn more and maybe become shoppers.
Wonderful.
And I am a former food editor of the Savannah Morning News a long time ago, and I'm an author, cookbook author. And my most recent book, I'll just shamelessly promote, is Nibbles and Scribbles, which is a food memoir, which tells all about where the recipes came from, who gave them to me, and where I ate them, cooked them. Today we've got spinach and we've got tomatoes from Joseph Fields' farm, which is outside of Charleston. So I chose a menu that features puff pastry because it makes everybody look good. So we are going to use Trish McLeod, who is a former caterer in Savannah, and I know is also a supporter of Farmers Market. I deliberately chose this recipe of hers for tomatoes on puff pastry. So that's both your bread and your vegetable. And then we are doing a 1 skillet meal where we're going to saute some chicken breasts, remove them, saute some spinach, and then slice the chicken breast and lay it back on the bed of spinach. And then we're going to top off our meal with blueberry muffins. Bright green spinach, I'm thinking red tomatoes, and I'm thinking blueberry muffins. So I think we've got all the bases covered. I have done a little bit of prep work. I have creamed 1 stick of butter and 1 cup of sugar. Now this blueberry muffin recipe came from a column that I write for the Twaddle out at the Landings, and it actually is a take on a blueberry muffin recipe that was served in a very famous department store. And but there are a couple of tricks that I think are important when you're doing muffins. And number 1 is that once you add the flour, you do not want to overmix the batter. If you do that, the muffins just won't be good. So I have creamed 1 stick of butter, 1 cup of sugar, and I'm going to add 2 eggs and make a lot of noise. Okay? So I'm going to hush for a minute because you probably don't need to know how to crack an egg. I know that there are eggs sold at the farmer's market, so that's a good place to go for your eggs. Now you can cream, at this point, you can cream this pretty well. But once I add those dry ingredients, you want to have a tender hand and just barely stir it. I'm adding 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and I already know that somebody's going to be saying, where's that vanilla from? It's from Mexico. I did a cooking class for senior citizens a couple of years ago, and somebody there, this was my parting gift, and I just love it. It's very intense vanilla. A cup of milk, or half a cup of milk. I'm using buttermilk because I just like that tang. I think that that's a good thing to put in a blueberry muffin when you've got that much sugar. It is a sweet muffin. All right, now, and you'll notice I'm just barely mixing these, and it calls for 2 cups of flour. And you'll notice, you know, I think when you're cooking, you need to make life easy for yourself. So I find rather than trying to dig down in those bags, in that short little, you know, hole that you make in your flour bag, I put them in things where I can really get down in there. So now I've got 2 tablespoons of baking flour and a half a teaspoon of salt that I'm going to add. And I'm using half a teaspoon. And now I'm going to use that light hand that I talked about with just a spatula. And I'm going to go down on the sides and get all of those delicious dry ingredients mixed in. And it does take a minute because you know, it's a thick, muffins is a very thick batter. There is still some flour in the very, very bottom. You have to kind of go deep to get that. And now we are ready for the blueberries. And I made sure to choose Georgia blueberries. Blueberries are produced in Georgia in great supply. And then this is where you don't want those blueberries broken. So you really want to be gentle with how you are mixing this. I have gone into the fields and picked blueberries. That's something I decided to leave to the farmers because it is hard work. Now, I've got prepared baking pan here. And by prepared, all I have done is just sprayed the interior with Pam. And I'm going to use 1/3 of a cup measure. I mentioned that my grandfather was a farmer in Bullitt County, His name is Emery Spear Lane. And he would send us out into the fields to pick corn. He grew Silver Queen, and he liked it when the corn was just barely, I mean, it was I say in that book, it was the size of baby teeth. You know, just little teeny tiny kernels of corn. And there were rattlesnakes in the field. And so you have to be really careful. The way to be careful is to be noisy so that the rattlesnakes will stay away from you and go somewhere else. But it was pretty treacherous. I'm glad I didn't. I mean, at the time, you just did what you were told, snakes or no snakes. But I doubt many children are sent into the fields now to get corn. So I'm gonna come over here, put these in. These cook for 25 minutes. So those are gonna get going. When Trish gave me this recipe, it was for little Italian plum tomatoes, and she catered, and she needed to know how many she could get out of a sheet of pastry, and you can get 18 of those out of a sheet of pastry. Well, today I'm using these beautiful farm-raised tomatoes, and so what I assumed is that they would be bigger than an Italian plum. And you'll notice I'm rinsing everything off. And you always do that with produce because you just, you know, they've been handled by somebody. And water does help you get some of the bacteria off. And so I just always like to rinse my vegetables. And I'm going to take a tomato and take my cutter and just make sure that it is going to match, because you don't want the tomato hanging over the edge of the puff pastry, because the puff pastry is going to wrap itself around the tomato. So it's really a fun little, and I'm cutting these, I don't know what that is, maybe 1/8 of an inch thick. It's certainly not a quarter, but it's not a sliver. So it's somewhere between a sliver and 1/8 of an inch. This would be something that you could put together in about 45 minutes if you had all the ingredients. So it would be a good after work meal. So we're going to start by cutting the puff pastry. And like I said, I chose puff pastry because it just is delicious and always impresses. And if you don't have a cutter, you can use a glass, anything that will cut through the pastry. And then what we're going to do, a lot of times I noticed when I would get recipes from caterers, it was less about a recipe and more about a combination of flavors kind of built on top of each other. So we're going to start by pricking the puff pastry. And believe me, I'm not going to waste this puff pastry. I will find some other use for it. And we're going to prick it with a fork. And that's so that it is full of air, and that will allow the air to come out. And I know that we're beginning to produce olive oil in Georgia. And that's an exciting thing. I know of several places in South Georgia. My home is Valdosta, and I know that down near Hayhira, I believe, there is a olive oil producer. I'm going to use Manchego, which is a Spanish cheese, and kind of like one of the best ones ever. So it's going to have great flavor. So we're going to put a little bit of that on here. And I'm cooking on parchment. I think most cooks today know how wonderful parchment is. When I first started cooking, you couldn't get parchment. You'd have to go to the meat market and ask the butcher if he would give you some butcher paper, because there was no such thing. I'm sure that there was for some cooks, but not for me. I've got some coarse salt. And a little black pepper. And I've got both fresh thyme that I grow out in a little pot outside. And I think thyme is such a delicate little herb. It's got a wonderful flavor, but it really, the fresh thyme actually, ooh, it smells so good, but it does kind of have a delicate flavor. So I also have dried thyme here because I think I'm going to put a little bit of dried thyme on it because I think you can have too much thyme. And then we're going to add our sweet little tomatoes. And then we're going to sprinkle lightly with Parmesan cheese. Now, it says fresh Parmesan cheese, and yes, that would be better. But I just don't want you to feel like you have to go out and spend the money. I mean, this is delicious with, I've used just grated Parmesan cheese out of the can. You know, and I'm promising that this is going to be delicious. And these go in for 15 minutes. Lo and behold, we have 16 minutes on the timer, so we're doing great. Because that means that the muffins and the tarts should come out at the same time. I always say I'm not going to clip another recipe. I have hundreds of recipes that I'll never be able to cook in a lifetime. And so, but I had to. It just looked too delicious, and it had all the things that I love in it. It's got olive oil and boneless chicken breast and garlic and white wine and cream and baby spinach. I mean, what's not to like? It is really hard to get a breast evenly cooked without a little pounding. So we're going to pound that with the flat side of a mallet, okay, so that this is a great way to get out your frustrations during the pandemic if you want to try it. And I'm just going to eyeball it. I really don't want it too thin because I'm going to slice it. I don't want a cutlet because if I wanted a cutlet, I could have bought a cutlet. Okay. Now I'm going to salt and pepper them and put them in a bag of flour. And I know that some of you, we are in a pandemic, and my husband laughs at me because he thinks I am so germophobic. But after this shoot is over, everything up here will get Lysol. Everything I've touched, and you should be doing that too. So we just can't be safe enough. There's no reason not to do that. And it's good practice anyway. It's just good hygiene. So, you know, I'm encouraging everybody to be as safe as possible. And this is not a lot of flour. It's just enough to sort of coat the breast. And we're not going to use the excess at all. Now, this is the same cup that I used for the buttermilk. And I'm going to use it to measure a cup of heavy cream. So if it's a dry ingredient, it goes in a dry ingredient cup. If it's a liquid ingredient, it goes in a glass measure. So very important little tip. My background is home economics, which is very old-fashioned but very useful. So I'm going to put olive oil in the bottom of this pan. I love this particular pan because it's got the handles that can go in the oven. And it also has a nice flat bottom. And here's another secret, here's another tip, is the instant meat thermometer. That's how we're going to know exactly when our chicken breasts are 165 degrees. Because the minute they are, we're going to take them out and finish up the dish. The chicken breasts are going to cook approximately 6 minutes aside. And you can't smell it, but my kitchen is starting to smell real good. Because those blueberry muffins in there. So you've got the sweet, the savory, and I think this will be savory too. When I did this for my husband and I did cook some pasta, and I served this over pasta because we like to eat heavy at night. I mean, that's our big meal. We kind of eat real light during the day. So anyway, you can decide whether or not to do that. A rice ring would be beautiful. There is a little juice. All right, now our chicken breasts are in. I've contaminated my hands again, so I gotta go back to the sink. While that's cooking, we need to mince shallots and garlic. And it calls for a half a cup, and it says about 2 large. I just do 1. And it's different than an onion. And then it calls for 3 cloves of minced garlic. And I do, the other day Gary was cooking and he said, is the clove the whole thing? No, that's the bulb, and then this little tiny thing is the clove. I really don't want to cut this shallot on that tomato board. I am going to cut the shallot and the garlic on the same board. And this shallot is just this beautiful purple color, and it's got a milky interior. I cook by sound and my nose. I use my nose, I use my ears. So I'm listening to the chicken sizzling and thinking about when I need to check that, because I want it to get good and brown. I would love it if I could only turn it 1 time, because you don't break up the meat quite so much. You treat it very gently. So, but I don't know if I can get away with that or not. I mean, it just depends. Depends on how many distractions you have in your house. Because I have 4 little grandchildren, and when they're over, I don't do, you can't think about much of anything. So this would not be a meal that you would do with a lot of distractions, because you do have to think a little bit. And now I'm going to take the side of my hand and hit this clove of garlic, and that peels off that really tough outer skin. And I'm going to take off the very tip there, and I'm going to take off a lot of people pull this entire green thing out because it's supposed to be bitter. I mean, I just adore garlic, and so I hate to waste any of it. And we need 3 cloves. Now I just will look. I think I'm going to turn that down ever so slightly. I might need just a teeny bit more olive oil. I think that's a little dry in there. And I'm going to peek at the underside. Turn the heat up. So I'm going to turn our heat up, reduce that stock, reduce that wine by half, and you have to kind of notice where the liquid is in the pan so that you'll know when it's reduced by half, because you don't pour it back out and measure it. You just sort of eyeball it. It should get much thicker. And in the meantime, we've got our spinach over here. I have rinsed the spinach and I've allowed it to drain. You want it as dry as possible, because you don't want to add a lot of water to this, because what we've got is intense flavors in here, and we don't want to mess it up with just adding water. And we have not added any salt and pepper, and I don't know, I need to taste a little bit of that liquid to see, but I want to wait until after it's ready before we add the spinach, because I don't want it too salty. And I don't know how much salt came off of the chicken during the cooking, and how much of that was in those bits that are in the bottom. So we're just going to have to wait and see. And now we're going to add our whipping cream. Okay. All right, that's supposed to reduce by half too. So what we can do, our chicken is resting, it's losing a little bit of juice, and I'm gonna pour that juice right back in there. And I'm going to just slice it through. And it is absolutely perfectly cooked. And that's thanks to our thermometer. Because if you were trying to guess if it were cooked, you'd never in the world be able to know, because the outside's going to cook so much quicker than that interior part of the chicken. A teaspoon of salt we've got to contend with. This is a full teaspoon, so I've just got it partially filled. You see how that big bowl of spinach, I'm going to show you what we've got left. And you would cook it, and you know, as much as you want to, but you see that it has really already cooked. Significantly down, probably reduced by more than half. Some spinach, a spinach bed. And then we would do the chicken breast. And you probably are going to need a knife to. Blueberries are notoriously sticky when they pop, and they definitely popped. And that is our beautiful farmer's market meal. And so we want you to all rush up there on Saturdays and buy the things that you need to prepare such a delicious meal, and also support our farmers with a financial donation if you so choose. So thank you.
Wasn't that just wonderful, y'all? That Martha surely has inspired us to be able to shop local and support our local farmers. I also want you to support us if you could. Click the support us button right above to financially contribute to the Forsyth Farmers Market. This is our second and our last Farmsgiving for 2020. And so I just want to take a moment just to say thank you so much for all your support, both for these Farmsgiving events as well as everything throughout the year. Hope you'll all have a happy and wonderful holiday season and a prosperous and happy new year. Thank you so much.